This time we are giving the audience what you asked for. Exhaust manifolds versus mid-length headers versus long tubes. Because we're givers. This is Engine Masters, which is presented by AMSOIL, sponsored by Mr. Gasket and Earl's Vapor Guard. And this time we're responding directly to what the audience told us the last time that we did a header episode. They said they really want to see a cast iron exhaust manifold versus a mid-length header versus a long tube. And we're going to do it on this engine right here. Our first multi-point injected engine on Engine Masters. It's controlled by Holley HP EFI. Now the engine is basically a Blueprint engine's crate motor. It is a 6-liter with forged pistons in it. It's got Blueprint aluminum heads with a 259 intake runner, a stock intake manifold, and a fast throttle body. The camshaft has been changed out from what Blueprint offers. It's a comp unit. It has 221, 247 duration at 50. This thing makes pretty good power, and we're probably gonna kill some of that with the cast iron manifold. So those are sort of the tech specs on our engine, and we have to thank Stephen Rupp at Super Chevy Magazine. He loaned us this engine so that we could thrash on it on the dyno, which is super cool of him. Now, the exhaust products that we're testing here all come from Hooker headers, which makes a complete line of parts to swap LS-based engines into older cars, but you get to choose between the headers. And this is kind of similar to what you would find in any engine where you can get a cast iron manifold, kind of like a stock manifold, or a mid-length header, which isn't as long as the full long tube header. The long tube probably makes the best power. The mid-length I really like for a street car because of ground clearance. The cast iron is quietest, cheapest, probably easiest to fit, but right now we're gonna find out if the power difference between the three is worth the compromise to you, so you can pick out which is best for your car. We're gonna roll this thing into the dyno right now, throw some sauce in it, and fire it up. This is a loaner engine, which normally means that you'd go straight to the 5-gallon jug of recycled oil, if not the stuff that you scraped off the top of Dulcich's pond on the farm. But because AMSOIL sponsors this, we get this stuff free, which means even for Stephen Rupp, we're gonna go straight to the good stuff. Z-Rod 1030. We're ready to fire up our baseline with the cast iron manifolds. Steve got this thing all tuned up before we got here, so we should have a pretty solid baseline right now. So we're looking at 400 and basically 50 pound-feet of torque and 474 horsepower at 5,700 RPM. So that's not magical, but pretty good.
Yeah, but consider it's exhaust manifolds too.
I know, that's actually pretty cool.
We're used to running everything with headers. So.
Yeah, so you feel pretty good about that number? We can use that as a base?
We can poke around from the tuning I had done earlier. I mean, we're within 2 or 3, so it's right where it was.
Okay, well, that's all we need. These things are the Hooker titanium coated manifolds. I really like the way they look. Great. They're not coated with actual titanium, but with titanium color.
The real secret is you leave the last bolt for last. It almost perfectly balances like that, so.
I really like those cast iron manifolds. Like if I was gonna swap an engine in like our crew cab Chevelle.
What about the Jeep? If you had a Jeep to put in.
Or a Jeep, yeah, I would use them.
Do you think the mid-length or shorty header is gonna be just as good?
Well, look at the design. See how these are individual tubes that go down to a collector? That's gonna make more power than this manifold, because look, the manifold design is just little short tubes dumping straight into a log.
It's a log manifold is what it is.
That's what's gonna make the difference. The main good thing about these mid-length headers is ground clearance. I think that's really the main reason to use them. If you have a long tube, sometimes the collector can drag the ground. The other thing is if you're running a late model car and you want to keep your catalytic converters, the mid-length can make it easier to do that. This is a 1 3/4 inch tube header. It's designed for a 2nd gen Camaro. It goes with the entire hooker swap kit for an LS engine into one of those cars. We took and made collector extensions for each of these manifolds that is the same overall length of the exhaust system so that we can not have a variance in our test results based on the length of the collector extension, which does make a difference. I'm gonna say these make more power everywhere in the curve, both torque and horsepower, and pick up 18 numbers at both peaks.
I'm gonna say it's gonna be better, and I'm not picking a number, because every time I do, and I think I know what I'm talking about,
You're wrong.
The dyno brain's wrong and you guys take my money, so I'm not playing.
I'll tell you exactly what it's gonna do. No, seriously.
Wait, are you on the spirits again?
No. It's gonna be 14 foot-pounds at the bottom because of the collector, and about 8 horsepower numbers on top because the tubes aren't that long.
You know, the one thing I know for sure is that we never know.
No, I do. I'm going to be right.
That's true.
We know
We're
they're going to be
close.
better, so.
Well, let's fire it up, make it a fact instead of a guess. So we just made 488 horsepower and the torque was 464, but where's the overlay of this versus the manifolds?
Bam.
Bam! I called it, which is really no clairvoyance.
You are. You're clairvoyant, just like Dulcich.
Better everywhere, but I think I missed my 18 numbers. Where are we peak to peak? What kind of scale are we looking at there? 474 up to 488. So I picked up 14 numbers.
It just picked up everywhere.
Yeah, it picked up everywhere by between 12 and 14 numbers everywhere in the curve, except for right here, it's a little bit close, right at 3,600, but who cares? Overall, a good benefit. The thing you do have to judge on this, though, is that little bit of power throughout the curve worth the difference in like sound and ease of fitment and all that other stuff?
If you asked me that question 20 years ago, I'd have a very clear answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure today. The cast iron stuff is pretty cool
I know,
right now.
it is pretty cool. I'm surprised they even make that, but I've seen in a lot of applications it works. And if you had like a 4.8 or a 5.3 that's not moving as much air, the difference is gonna be, I'm guessing, even less, right?
I would have to think when the airflow requirements are less. You know, I remember doing some tests with a couple of engines with stock camshafts in them, not very high horsepower, doing a header swap, and it did almost nothing. And then we would put a camshaft in it and pick up some power and then do the header change, and it would pick up 30 or 40.
The cam makes a big difference.
Sure,
I did a header test kind of similarly on a small block Mopar, and just about everything was the same with the tiny cam and then a big cam. Boy, there was night and day differences. But that's got a lot of overlap because of the long exhaust duration, but it's got a wide center, so that takes it away.
Exactly. So, I don't know. Let's find out what the long tube does.
Yeah.
Here's a cool tech tip. Mr. Gasket makes a bunch of neat little widgets, one of which is this headlock header bolt. You know how these often will come loose, especially when you're putting on new headers, new gaskets? Look how it's serrated on the back of the bolt head, kind of like a star washer. That's pretty cool. But here's what I like better about them. They've got an Allen hex in the middle of the head of the bolt, so you can use this tool to tighten it up instead of having to fumble with a socket and stuff when a header tube's really close. So, pretty cool. What we're doing here is really kind of universal. It doesn't matter what engine you're using. You know, between an LS motor, a Ford, or a small block Chevy, or whatever, the relative performance of the manifolds versus mid-length versus long tube is going to be about the same. So you can apply this to whatever it is you're driving. We rolled the cherry picker in here because we needed to flip the motor mount side to side to make the header clear it. We had them on backwards. Now we've got the long tubes on here, and in theory, the longer tube should make more torque. And I think in this engine, it'll probably make more torque everywhere, and more torque adds up to more horsepower because horsepower is a function of RPM and torque. The other thing about this header is that it has a slightly larger collector diameter. It's, I think, 3-inch, although we didn't measure it, instead of a 2.5. And that's more appropriate for this kind of power that we're making. Now, you're all gonna scream, that means this isn't a scientific test of tube length. No, it's not. What this is more of a test of parts that you can buy from the aftermarket off the shelf, and you can make the right decision about what you're gonna get when you're doing your LS swap. Now we have the long tubes on there, which is like the only thing we ever should have had installed on this for making power. But how much better will they be?
506.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
I'll go with Brilio on this one.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be that much better. Because of the tube length or because of the larger collector?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
All of it. They're just better.
The long tube headers made 474 pound-feet of torque and 494.5 horsepower. Let's look at it compared to the mid-length header.
Wow.
So here in black, you've got the long tube, and here's where you've got that mid-length. That's where you can see the engine really wakes up with that long tube header. Now down here at 2500, there's a little bit of a change, but you're not really driving around at wide open throttle at 2500 RPM that much. And that's where the dyno's testing. I've seen a lot of comments from people like, well, I only drive at 2500. They don't realize our entire test on the dyno is at wide open throttle. So this isn't telling you anything about the part throttle drivability.
We always hear those comments about why didn't you pull it lower? And it's like, when is your motor truly, unless you're towing something and you're an idiot in 5th gear in your truck,
Right.
when are you at 2,000 or 2,500 RPM at wide open throttle? Even with a converter, as soon as you touch it, it's passed and through there.
And then here's the long tube header in black versus the Hooker cast manifold in red. Huge difference there.
Yeah, but you really get a mountain of extra torque right where you need it for like passing or acceleration.
What is a little interesting to me is that the curves are so much the same. They are so similar.
Same shape.
I would have thought that they may have diverged a bit as the requirements of airflow increased with engine speed.
But I don't think it's airflow.
Diverged. But no, it's not. It's tuning. It's cylinder filling.
It's cylinder filling and tune length. But I'm surprised that the log cast iron manifold isn't much worse than this, honestly. I think we proved what we knew, but it gives people a specific scale to know, you know, what am I going to lose versus my compromises? Like if I want to have more ground clearance with a mid-length header, that's exactly what I'm going to lose.
Yeah, it kind of quantifies what you're giving up and what you're gaining. I mean, the mid-length's probably a little easier to fit. That gives you the most power and torque. The log is just the simplest, quietest, and most durable maybe.
The big thing I took away from this is I've got that 5.3, which if I put that in the Chevelle or something, I'd use those cast iron manifolds.
Sure.
Because it's not gonna kill that much power in something that's only making 350 to begin with.
Okay, so manifolds,
And
what
it's
do you
quieter.
pick?
What do I pick?
Yeah, he went with manifolds.
Well, not for this engine.
No?
No, long tubes are always the best
Yeah.
choice if you actually want to go fast.
If you asked me 20 years ago, the answer would have always been a long tube header, and now it might be manifolds because they're really kind of convenient and easy to work on and never leak and all those good things.
So good test.
Yeah?
Yeah, proved what we wanted to prove. No big, huge surprises, but a nice illustration of what you get bang for the buck.
So who brought the beer?
I thought you were going to get the beer.
Oh man.
You think we gave the people the content they were hungry for?
You told me what I wanted to know. The
Really?
big tubes won.
Oh, I know. Big tubes, long tubes are never the wrong decision for horsepower.
Right.
Unless, of course, you're running a top fuel car and you can have zoomies. But the thing I took away from this episode is if I had a stock 4.8 or 5.3, I would run those Hooker manifolds. Those things are actually pretty good.
I've got to say, I mean, all the setups were pretty good. It wasn't a complete blowout. I mean, this was the best, but it wasn't like any of them were terrible.
Yeah, you're right. The difference between the manifold and the mid-length in particular wasn't as much as I expected it to be.
Well, you know, I'd pick the long tubes anyway, but
Yeah.
I was
Horsepower over convenience every time.
bigger is always better as far as I'm concerned, but I can see your point.
Bigger is always better every time on Engine Masters. Presented by AMSOIL, sponsored by Mr. Gasket and Earl's Vapor Guard. We'll see you next time.
It's like a rap thing, I think. It's like a DJ Dulcich. Julio doesn't really realize he's going up against a wise and all-knowing engine master on this
Do you
horsepower
answer your
prediction.
That's how he answers the
Do
phone.
you answer the phone that way? Steve Dulcich, engine master?
No, wise and all-knowing engine master.
Haba! Haba!
You like that front-mounted throttle body?
Oh, yeah.
Fuel injection for the first time?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
No. Were you?